ARCS. This just might be the game of 2024. We've heard comparisons to Root, to Twilight Imperium, to Oath, and today we'll give you our first impressions and we'll see where this game sits in our minds on Legendary Tactics. Gastel, Rusky, and I have played this game one time, and we found that this is a very unique game. It really stands apart, and I think this is something that Cole Worley has done with Root, with Oath, with PAX Pamir 2nd Edition, so we'll preview that with you today. We've only had one gameplay, and what I'd like to do is go over the mechanisms, we'll go over comparisons to other games, we'll talk about the theme, we'll look at the aesthetics and the components, which you can see in front of you, and we'll of course give you a balanced review with an upside-downside. I should say this is more of a preview. We haven't played this game enough to have a really thorough review. We just wanted to give you a sense of where we're at. We did receive a review copy of this game, and we'll try not to let that taint our first impressions. So why don't we begin? I think what's most unique about this is the mechanism. So in a snapshot, how is this game different from other board games you've played? What makes it so unique?
Well, it's like Twilight Imperium in the fact that it takes a lot of different good ideas from different games and brings them together. A lot of interesting mechanisms that play on each other. For example, there is a hand of cards that are being played, but each card has a suit which determines which actions you can play, and also a number, how strong it is, the number of actions that you can play on that particular turn, and then a symbol down here which helps determine the ambitions, the one and only way of scoring points in this game.
Right, so if you have no experience with ARCS, this is what really matters, the ambitions. And you can get caught up in all the rest of the game, but ultimately if you don't do this, you don't win the game. And it's really cool. So essentially, to score points, you need to meet these different objectives, but you also have to activate them. So in order to trigger one of the ambitions, you need to get rid of whatever the value is on your card, which means that everybody who plays after you, if they follow their suit, they're going to get a ton of actions. So the game has built-in catch-up mechanisms where the person who wants to be scoring points because they're in an ideally situated position to get points from these, they need to sacrifice for a turn. So first they have to win the initiative to get this spot. Then they have to sacrifice this value, which means everybody else is going to get some amazing moves. And I think that that's where this game really shines, because you're trying to score points, hold your board in place while everybody else is outperforming you. Really super cool. Now, were there any other mechanisms that stood out to you?
Well, there's area control and...
Area control light, probably.
Area control light. In fact, most of the mechanisms are quite light. There's no individual rule that is insanely complicated, but there's a lot of little things that are playing together. But rather than listing all the mechanisms, I just like to think of it as its own game that has all of these different flavors together. Right. The question is, do the flavors taste good in the end? That's right, yeah. So if you're looking for something that has a motley Neapolitan taste, this might be a really neat game for you to try. I personally found that some of the area control was just enough for my taste. There's a slingshot effect where you can move around the board fairly quickly. So I think the goal is to make a fast-paced game. Sometimes you get some of the, like Twilight Imperium, it takes forever to build up your armada, get it all the way across the map. This one you can do that fairly quickly. It's you maybe struggled a little. You had a big fleet in our game and worked to get it across, and then it just got blown up because it was so intimidating. Yeah, although the difference is that only took me 5 minutes to build that fleet, whereas in Twilight Imperium, that might have been an hour and a half or 2 hours of gameplay invested in trying to get there, and that can hurt really, you know, almost emotionally because you worked so hard for something. Here it felt a little more like, oh, well, that wasn't the best strategy. I'll try something better next time. Stakes are a little lower. Yeah. A little lower. So one thing that we thought was really important, and you made a really interesting comparison. So tell us about the comparison that you were thinking of here.
Well, the ambitions here, they change each round and they're triggered by you. We were trying to think of other games that have different victory conditions or different victory points each round.
From round to round.
From round to round. And so Wingspan has that where you can then strategize. Each round there's different victory points available.
And those are generated randomly, where you draw your card and it's, you can see three rounds ahead, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, so you can actually plan long term, whereas here you really can't. And some stuff stays on your tableau from round to round, so you have to then make it happen, right? But you don't always score each thing,
right?
Just like in the Wingspan. But this takes it up to a whole new level, because you have to make it happen, and you can plan longer term in advance, but unless you get initiative and make it happen, it's not gonna happen.
Are you able to, when you see someone take that initiative and make it happen, are you able to capitalize on that turn?
So you can piggyback.
Well, and knowing when to switch your strategy to piggyback and when to say, no, that's not for me right now, I'm going for something else.
That's right.
Yeah.
Something that I would characterize this game as having is intense levels of strategy. And as first time playthrough, we had 4 of us at the table, and we were all massively overwhelmed, but in, I think, a very good way, where there were so many different paths to victory. I stumbled upon one way that was completely effective. I unlocked +2 to 1 ambitions, +3 to 1 ambitions, because I spammed as many buildings on the board as I could. I had no idea what I was doing, but that worked really well for me. There's a hint for you, added value, if you're trying to win at this, that can work well. Yeah. But that is tied to the asymmetric player power. So if you know Coal Whirling, you know Root, you know that asymmetry is an absolutely vital part of that game. I would say in this, it's not quite as vital. The inherent play of the game is essentially the same. We just have a variable player power.
And the variable player powers are all offset by a variable player disadvantage.
Yes.
And I found sometimes those disadvantages hurt more than the advantages helped, or sometimes the advantage seemed like it was going to be great, but then only activated once in the whole game.
Right.
Whereas other advantages seem to be happening on a more regular basis.
My advantages was dice rolling, and of course I did not roll well. Right. Which negated my advantage completely, and my disadvantage was fairly severe.
We really need to mention this too, because if you're getting into this, you see the dice here. Part of the strategy of the game is choosing your dice. Would you like to tell us how
I think that work? This is something else that sets this game apart.
It really does.
In my mind.
And I
being able to choose your kind of attack mechanism.
I'm the type of person who loves a game that has dice, but I hate games that have luck based on die rolling. And so I feel like this one, you have some choice in how you take a risk.
Well, it lets you decide exactly how much risk you want to take on.
It also allows you to goad your opponent into taking more risk than they should.
Which
is fun.
Yes.
Which is fun.
Yeah, that's true. But basically they come in 3 flavors. This being the lowest risk and orange being the highest risk. When you attack, you count your number of ships, you count any extra cards that might affect your power. Only the attacker rolls, there's no defense roll. But then say I have the number 6. So I'm going to roll 6 dice. But I freely get to choose which color I want to roll. So if I just want to go safe, I can roll these blue dice. There's misses, but there's nothing that's going to damage me. Now maybe I want to go a little bit more, and so I go with these assault dice. And with the assault dice, you can see sometimes they have 2 hits, but they also have these flames, and they also have these rings. And those are damage that's going to come to me, particularly the rings, which are determined on the size of my opponent's fleet. I want to go even more risky. I want to raid. At this point, there's no hits on these dice, so I can never damage their ships. But here, I'm attacking their cities and these keys. I'm stealing the cards from their own tableau. I could even be stealing resources from their player tableau, and that just turns the game right on its head. I will say, in our one playthrough, nobody rolled a single one of these.
No.
Nobody wanted to take the risk.
I think we partially didn't really understand them, and so I built up this beautiful tycoon, and someone could have come along and done this and taken everything from me, and that would have been one of the greatest turns in the game. But early on, it's tough to manage everything that's going on in this game.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Next, we'll look at the aesthetics and components. I would say if you're buying this game like a traditional Root game, I was actually really surprised that the box is as small as it is. It's quite tiny, but it's heavy, and I think that's very much like Root. When you open the box, there isn't a massive wow factor. You don't look at all the components and go, wow, look at this. I mean, like these components are fine. But there's nothing, you know, particularly outstanding. This thing's okay. It's a little bit of a weird shape. The dice are fine. They're normal sized dice. The cards are normal. So there's nothing to me that stands out as like super wow factor. I think your real value in this game comes from an incredible designer who really knows what they're doing, and they sell you, it's a true board game that isn't dressed up to make it fancier than it is. That being said, one of my favorite artists in all of board gaming, Kyle Farron, who did Root, who did Oath, who did this game. And so when we get into some of these cards, let's get these right out in front.
The art is fantastic. While you were saying that, I was going to be like, well, the art is fantastic.
The art is gorgeous. So, and I think there's something to be said for that with a game that doesn't require big miniatures and all of that, so that it can keep the cost of the board game down. And there's just, this is a game I'm going to come back to over and over for the game itself, not for the components and the aesthetics.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. It stands up as a game, and while the art is fantastic, there could be no art and you'd still play the game, sort of thing.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And also I think thematically, this is the question of whether this game comes together. And so based on all this sort of pastiche of different mechanisms and elements, how do you feel, Rusky, about how everything blends together?
So I quite enjoyed how it all came together. I really enjoyed the different suits that allow you then to unlock different abilities. And then I liked how that fit with the gameplay. Like, I thought it all came together in a nice package.
There's so much decision making.
There really is. And then, of course, ultimately you have to initiate the ambitions or you don't get anything out of it. Right. And so
I found my heart was getting ripped out playing some of these moves because let's say somebody plays a 4. Then you need to surpass that if you want to play a suited. So like this card here is the wrong suit, so I'll only get 1 action, so that's a complete waste of a 5. Likewise, that doesn't work, but here we go. So I can play this, but I'm only getting 2 actions for that. If I play it face down, I get 1 action off the lead card. Right. So you're balancing in your mind, ooh, is this even worth it at this point? But you might also need the card in order to trigger that ability. So in that case, this is the keeper ability that you would be triggering there. So I love with this how there's multiple different ways that these cards get used. One of my downsides, actually, I'll get to this one while we're on the topic here, is that this whole part of basically this is the only part of the card that matters. This is meaningless. There's no information on this part of the card here that you need. And I think they should have changed that, because when we were playing, if I was sitting in your position, if someone played the card, not only is the text pointed the wrong way, but it's also so small you can battle or move or secure. So when you don't know the game, it's a little bit hard to know that. But if it was here, battle or move, secure, and they had like 3 stripes to show the action. So
I think we kept trying to build when we could battle and stuff like that. And that was just our own experience.
That's right.
But you're right. It was
so for learning
text on there.
The game, I found that to be a bit of a downside, even though I absolutely loved the mechanism itself. Right. So very good. Yeah. So we should talk about upside downside too. So let's start with the upside. What would you guys say is the big takeaway if people are looking to buy this game?
If you're looking for a strategic game to play with your friends, this is it. If you want, it's not a Euro game. You are sort of building an engine, so maybe it's a little Euro-y, but this is a war game. And if you want to play that sort of strategy with your friends, this is excellent.
Yeah, I felt like it was like a kind of a space opera a little bit. In terms of like the complexity of it, it had a lot to it. So if you want to like take the gaming up a couple of notches in terms of decision making and kind of a different attack options and stuff like that, I felt like this did that fairly well, right? It definitely ratchets up the intensity in terms of like multiple layers of thought and different actions. And
Okay, so something I think that we have to mention with this is a 4X game. Now, originally I thought it was only a 3X game. So to begin with, you expand across the board. You're given a couple of spots to begin with, but then you need to claim your territory and you move to the different locations. Next, you exploit. So on each planet, there's different resources that lend to different ambitions to try to win that. So it's absolutely that. We also have exterminate. In order to achieve your goals, you need to wipe out your enemy ships here. So yeah, and that for me was where this game shone. It was a lot of fun just whenever your threat came in, trying to wipe it out and teaming up against this guy. And so where we thought, oh, it's not really explore, because if you look at the map, you see all of the information. There's no exploration there, but we were wrong, and I have Gastel to thank for this. The Explorer comes from the deck of cards, and so one of the things that you're trying to do is win these cards, and through a bidding process. And all of these cards are different stories that could be told, different rules that you can find, different powers that you can win, different abilities that you can use in order to get an advantage over your opponent. So I think the exploration of the game comes in a different way. It comes through the deck. So that's fantastic.
And that was something that I think we underutilized in our gameplay.
We absolutely did. And
right?
Now, one other downside that I think we should explore is one confusion we had when we began this game. And we're still not entirely sure. You might be able to help us out, but we think we know now. So these spaces that have a thin line are considered adjacent to one another. And then there's a rift in between some of these spaces. So you can still cross through this area here, but you can't cross here to here. Now, initially, we were looking at this as one giant area, but we thought this maybe wasn't connected because of this bubble. In retrospect, we do think that you can travel across here because this thin line is the same as all of those. You can't travel, say, from here to here, but you could travel from here to there or here to there. So we think that this is just a divider between this area and this area over here. But the artwork to us and the lack of explanation in the rules was a little bit confusing.
Yeah, and I take ownership for that, because I think you were like, oh, I'm going to move through that, and I was like, that's adjacent? Like, it hadn't even occurred to me that it would be adjacent, sort of thing.
And because we'd broken them up into like groupings of 3, and even in how we lay our ships to begin with, it was kind of broken into those groups of 3, right?
That's right. So
that led to that.
Just a point worth some clarification, that we did end up playing. You can go through here, but this is just a bubble to separate this zone from this zone. So overall, really strong game. This is one, I love a game that when I finish playing, I want to play again. And would you both agree that this is a game where you finish and you say, we have to try that again?
Well, I found this to be a very competent game, but it was not an experience like Twilight Imperium or some other board games that I enjoy. Yes, I do want to play it again. And after that game, I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to play it again, because it is a very good game. But it doesn't, you build a big fleet, it goes across, it gets blown up, and you're like, well, that's terrible, but, time to do my next move. The stakes just weren't there.
Right. So this isn't a game that you will probably go and tell stories about. Remember when this happened, or remember when that happened, like Twilight Imperium, where you get into the theme more, you get a little deeper immersed in. And for me, that's not a bad thing. I don't mind a game that is a little quicker to play, heavy strategy, but a little bit lighter in terms of takeaways at the end. I feel like there's lots of game left to explore here.
Well, that was why I wanted to play again, because after the first game playthrough, like, our strategies weren't probably pretty where we want them to be.
Suboptimal.
We weren't like optimizing different things. And I know that every game you play through, you can't always optimize everything, but we kind of stumbled our way through parts of it. And so that, for me, I wanted to play again because of that piece. I'm concerned that this game might suffer from not getting to the table maybe as much as some other games, just because of the length and the complexity of it. Like for me, I might have to be more like, do we want to have the commitment to playing that? Are we in the mindset for that? How tired are we? Right? Because if you're starting in on a hour-and-a-half game,
although you love Frosthaven, and this is not nearly as long as Frosthaven.
This is true. This is true.
Right. That's very true.
But the complexity here
is in the decision making.
Well, in the decision making and the competitive piece of it, changes it from getting together and going on an adventure with friends to a competitive think tank, which is fun and cool, but just for me, I have to be more like kind of in the mood for that, or be prepared for that type of game.
But you're going to play 10 times the number of games of this than you are Twilight Imperium.
Absolutely.
Or I've never played Eclipse, but I would even imagine Eclipse, because this is a little bit of a tighter game.
This is a backpack game. You can throw it in a tiny little backpack, carry it along with you. Twilight Imperium, you don't huck that thing around with you too often.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has an advantage over that for sure.
Yeah.
But you have to have the right people at the table to get this out.
Absolutely.
So it can't happen after midnight.
We'll be covering the Blighted Reach ARCS expansion. We'll be linking to that video shortly. In the meantime, really appreciate you guys coming and sharing your thoughts. Make sure you get your thoughts on ARCS down in the comments. Subscribe. We appreciate you being here. Now get out there.
Get gaming.
And be legendary.